Take your Bible if you have one there tonight and turn to Ephesians, the 4th chapter. Entitled this, Right Relationships. And in this process of falling in love with Jesus, the part of the process is making sure that everything is right between us and him and between us and our fellow man. You cannot be right with God vertically if you're not right with your fellow man horizontally. And so we want to talk about that for a few minutes tonight. When it comes to hurting people, it seems to me the place that shows up first is in closest relationships. Have you ever been hurt? And all of us have been hurt. And usually the people we hurt the most are the people that are closest to us. If I had $1 for every time I'd ask my wife to forgive me for something, I'd be a wealthy man. It just seems like because we've been married for quite a while, and sometimes as you get older, your filter lessens, and so we just say things we didn't really know we said, right? And we used to just think those things, and now we actually said those things, and we can hurt the people that are closest to us. I'm an incredibly insensitive person. One time, we were in the house, and Debbie said, you're not even listening to me, are you? And I thought, that's a funny way to start a conversation. And I realized that a lot of times we go through times like that where we're just not quite on the same page. And so trying to cover these two topics, though, when we're talking about bitterness and forgiveness, trying to deal with this in a short session like this is kind of like trying to explain nuclear fusion to a college science class. The potential is there, but to try to unpack that in one session is really difficult. Your pastor and I were talking about nuclear physics before the service tonight. It was quite a conversation. But anyway, and I love science. I was a science minor in college, and I enjoy that. And in nuclear, and he can correct me later, but in nuclear physics, there's fission and fusion. And fission is a splitting of atoms, and fusion is when two different atomic nuclei come in close proximity. They're of different mass. They combine. And when they do, they release subatomic particles, and they also include and release an incredible explosion. It's called an atomic bomb. And bitterness is like nuclear fusion. These two different people come close together because they're made up of different parts. They explode, and huge amounts of energy is released. And some of us are the result the life we're living is a result of someone's explosion of how it has affected us. And it's everything that we do, the way we look at life, the way we experience things is because of the hurt that we've experienced. On December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked. It's a day that will live in infamy. 9 ships were sunk, over 2,400 people died. And 4 years later, on August 6th, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb. It was on the city of Hiroshima. It was a town of 350,000 people. 4 days later, because the Japanese refused to surrender, another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, a city of 2,603 people. My dad was in the occupation troops that came in after the bombs were dropped to kind of occupy Japan after the war and saw much of the damage that took place as a result of what happened during those bombs. We didn't really know what was going to happen. But in the initial dropping of those bombs on these two cities of about 600,000 people total, 1/4 of the population died instantly. Can you imagine 130 to 150,000 people just vaporized, gone instantly? And that was bad enough. Bitterness is like a spiritual atomic bomb. In the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, we didn't really know. We didn't know what the collateral damage was going to be. But over the next 20 years, because of the radiation poisoning, because of the cancer that caused, another 150,000 people died from the collateral damage. And the fact is, the collateral damage of bitterness is just as damaging as the event itself. Just as the collateral damage of that atomic bomb was just as damaging as the actual dropping of it. And some of us are living in the collateral damage of bitterness. Hurt that lasts for years, broken relationships that are unmended for decades. And some bitterness, like radiation, is festering, an unresolved hurt. And one day, it'll eventually explode into your life. Some of you tonight are stewing in the radiation of bitterness. It's killing you little by little. Acts 8:23 talks about the gall of bitterness, or the bile of bitterness. Bitterness is like being stung to death by a bee, one sting at a time. Someone has said bitterness is like drinking poison, thinking the other person is going to die. And some of us are living that way. Now, all of us have been hurt. Let me sort of illustrate it like this. Let's just say that this aisle right here is Peace Parkway. And let me have Luke, you help me with this, and Cameron, okay? So Luke, here's what we're going to do. You're going to be coming down, this is going to be the hurt corner is going to be right here. You're going to be walking down this highway, and you're going to be Mr. Insensitive. It's going to be hard for you to be insensitive. You're such a sensitive guy, all right? But you're going to pretend, okay? You're going to be Mr. Insensitive, all right? And Cameron is going to come down the aisle here, and he's going to meet us right down here at hurt corner. And what I want you to hurt him. Okay, I want you to pretend you're playing for Ohio State or somebody, and here he comes to the line, and so Cameron, you can go ahead and come. A little slower, pretend you're in a wedding or something, okay? So you're going to come here, and you're going to make it here to hurt corner, and when you get here, you're not going to see Luke coming, okay? He's going to blindside you, and once you get to hurt corner, so let's see if Mr. Insensitivity how he can do that. He's walking kind of slowly. Oh! Wow. Okay, all right. Okay, you're good? Okay. Cameron, you stay here for a minute. Cameron, stay here for a minute. Okay, Luke, you can go. All right, that's fine. Okay, you can go. So here Cameron is. He's at hurt corner. Now, he just got pushed over into the bog of bitterness. Okay, which one? The bog is this way. Okay, he got pushed over in the bog of bitterness. But actually, at the turning point here, hurt corner, he's kind of confused. To a circle here like this, and then walk straight. Now, okay, here we go. And now the right thing would be to do, if there was another path here, is to go on the freeway of forgiveness. But a lot of us spend our life right here living in hurt corner. Thank you, Cameron. You did a great job. You can sit down. A lot of us live our life at hurt corner. We've got blindsided. Someone has done something, said something, hurt us in some way, and we're living in this explosion that has taken place, and we can't get free. And I've seen people after people come to hurt corner. It's an intersection we all pass through often in our life. And a mature person sees the value of forgiveness. But once you've been blindsided too many times, you stop forgiving. And there are people barreling down the road of insensitivity right now in your life. Sometimes it's due to stupidity. Sometimes vindictiveness. Sometimes it's a response to their own personal hurt. And hurt corner is where some of us have just lived our life. Now, at hurt corner, there are two people. There's the one being hurt and the one hurting others. As we walk through these next few minutes tonight, I want you to look through both lenses. Are you the one being hurt, or are you the one hurting others? And the probability is you're both. In some relationships, you're the one being hurt. In other relationships, you're the one doing the hurting. And we want to deal with both of those issues tonight. And you can either continue on the road of bitterness, live in that bog, or you can do a turnaround and get back and choose the path of forgiveness. So let's walk through that tonight. Now, the first step in dealing with bitterness is to understand this. All bitterness is ultimately directed towards God. If you're bitter at God. So no, Steve, I'm not bitter at God. Yeah, you are. Everything in your life has been passed through the hands of a sovereign, loving God. If you're bitter at God. On this little piece of paper that I handed out to you that you got when you came in, there's two columns. I choose to forgive. You're going to make a list of people you need to choose to forgive. And on the second one, I will ask so-and-so to forgive me. And on line number 2, probably the first person you need to go to is God. Because some of us have been bitter at God, again, demanding he explain to us and tell us why this happened and so forth. All bitterness starts towards God. And anything that's happened in your life has been passed through his loving, sovereign, grace-filled hands. I could talk for an hour about the sovereignty of God. I rest my life in the sovereignty of God. But the truth is, you have a bitterness issue, you really have a God issue. So let's talk about that. Look at in Ephesians chapter 4, turn there with me, Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to start at verse 25. This whole passage, there's 100 messages in this passage. The first part of Ephesians 4 talks about the unity of the Spirit. How can we have unity in the body of believers? He talks about our walk, starting in verse 17. And then starting about verse 25, he gives some specific issues. Now, many of us could quote this. He gives us specific direction about what to do and what not to do. How to have unity in the body of Christ. How to restore broken relationships. Now, this is not quantum physics or nuclear fusion. It is simple math. I try to break things down as simply as possible. And it almost seems too simple, but here's relationship math. If you want to have right relationships, here's what you have to do. You have to subtract hurtful actions. You have to add confessions of wrong actions. You multiply forgiveness, and that equals peace. If you want to have peace in relationships, this is relationship math. Stop hurting people. Confess where you have hurt people. Forgive people that have hurt you, and you can have peace. And even though that is so simple, we don't live that way. Most churches are filled with people that are in broken relationships with people that they come to church with every week. Some that you live with behind the doors of your own home. Now, you remember the story of Jesus, and Peter says to him one day, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? And I guess Peter was feeling pretty good that day. He said, how about 7 times? If I forgive 7 times, wouldn't that be pretty big of me? Now, the reason that was significant was the rabbis had legalized everything, even forgiveness. There was a rabbinical law that said you had to forgive 3 times. If someone did something to you, on the 4th time, you could take him to court. On the 4th time, you could divorce your husband, your wife, if she did something wrong 4 times. 3 times forgive her, but not on the 4th. And so they had legalized even forgiveness. So Peter doubles the law, adds 1 for good measure, says, how about 7 times someone wrongs me and I forgive them? Would that be pretty big of me? And what did Jesus say? He said, I don't say unto you 7 times, 70 times 7. Now what does that mean? Does that mean 490 times? Does that mean every time someone hurts you, you should write it down? There's a 222nd, 223rd, and finally on the 491st time, then you can get bitter. Is that what that means? No, it means the breadth of forgiveness is limitless. And the fact is, here's what this verse teaches. The fact is, no one's going to hurt you 490 times. But here's the fact. You're going to think about it 490 times. Forgiveness is not a one-time act. You don't say, I took care of that 10 years ago. I took care of that 5 years ago. No, it's every time it comes up, it's choosing again and again. You may have to forgive 490 times a month, a week, a day, depending on how many times you think about it. And the breadth of forgiveness is not a one-time act. It's choosing every time it comes up. I'm going to choose again to forgive. I saw this little cartoon. This is Jesus talking to the disciples, and he said, I tell you not 7 times, but 70 times 7. So one of them says this, oh, great. Now I have to forgive. I have to do math. And that's tough. So listen, forgive. It's easier than math. Math is hard. Stop keeping track. Stop saying, how many times do I have to do that? No, the point is it's limitless. There is no limit to the forgiveness you should be giving. And the problem is that's not the way we live our life. Ever felt like you were repeating needless commands? I'm going to give you this. It's so easy, so simple that I almost hate to say it. But sometimes we just have things repeated to us. Ever felt like that where you're just saying, close the door, pick up your towel, don't leave your underwear in the middle of the floor. That's just a wife to her husband, right? And so sometimes we just repeat things over and over. And this sounds so simple. Here's the answer, then we're going to talk about the problem. How do you have right relationships? Stop hurting people. Stop hurting people. We're going to get to this passage, verse 31. Stop doing this. And then ask forgiveness where you've heard of others. And then choose to forgive those who have hurt you. That's the answer. It's very simple. You've heard it 1,000 times. It's not new news. So Steve, I already know that. Are you doing it? Are you hurting people? Have you asked forgiveness for those you have wronged? And are you choosing to forgive 490 times a day, if necessary, those that have hurt you? Now, we're going to go through this little exercise. And I want you to walk through this with me. This passage here in Ephesians chapter 4. And it's going to list some things in these 2 categories. Things you have done or things that have been done to you. And if there's someone that has done something to you, I want you to write their name down on this card. This is for you to keep. But it'll help you as you walk through this here in the days ahead. So here's where we're going to start. Verse 25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak the truth. To each one of you with his neighbor, for your members one to another. So here's the first handle that he puts on. These are action stops, confessions made, and forgiveness given. And you're probably going to think of something in all those areas. But here's the first one. It's just lying. So as you think about lying, when was the last time you lied? Have you gone back to that person and asked forgiveness? You say, well, it's just a white lie. What's a white lie? I remember when I was in high school, I'd tell my parents, I'm going to go to the library. And they said, okay, great. And I'd leave. I'd go to the library. I would walk inside and walk back out. And then I'd go do something with my friends. But I went to the library. I can tell them, yes, I went to the library. That was a half-truth with intent to deceive. A half-truth with intent to deceive is still a lie. If you've lied to someone, you need to put their name down on number 2. I need to go to this person. I have lied to them. And need to go ask their forgiveness. Or maybe you've been lied to. Maybe you're hurt because someone lied to you. They said something to you, they lied to you, and you're bitter about that. You need to choose to forgive the people that have lied to you. Put away lying. So forgive those that have lied to you and stop lying. Maybe it's a promise someone made you, they didn't keep it. Or maybe it was something that you made and you never intended to keep that lie. Keep that what you said. And some of us have lived a life of a total lie. I was in a meeting, we're in a meeting in Alabama, and a lady came to me and she said, my whole life has been a lie. She said, I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, so when I went to school, I made up a family. I told all my friends about my great parents, my great siblings. They never met them, never saw them. They were all imaginary. I lied through all school about my family. I got out of high school, I joined the military. I was dishonorably discharged from the military. I tried to get a job, and I realized I needed to have some kind of diplomas. So I forged a diploma that said I was honorably discharged from the military. I forged a college diploma, and I forged a diploma from nursing school. I got a job as a nurse. She'd never been to college, never been to nursing school. Got a job as a nurse. She said, for 20 years, I served as a nurse. Never been to school. And then I got married early, got divorced. She said, 5 years ago, I met this man, and we've been married now for 5 years. And everything I've told him about my life up till meeting him has been a total lie. She said, if I go to him and tell him the truth and tell him I've been lying to him all about my whole life, my family, my career in the military, my schooling, my education, if I tell him the truth, he's going to leave me. She said, what should I do? I said, well, you need to live the rest of your life a lie, or you can get honest and put yourself in God's hands. And Debbie and I sat down with them as she shared with him the true story of her life and asked forgiveness for the lies she had told him for all those years back and told him the truth. And God did a great thing. And she stood before the church and asked the church to forgive her. She told all the church, and they thought she was at this wonderful life, and she'd lied about everything. I got a letter from her a couple years later. She said, Steve, these have been the greatest 2 years of my life. God is using my life. She's a counselor now. And it didn't happen until she got honest about her lying. Is that you? Here's the second. He goes on, verse 26. He says, be angry, but do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. So this is anger you go to bed with. Anger is an indication of unresolved bitterness. It doesn't say don't be angry. It says don't let anger turn to sin. Don't let anger go to bed with you. Debbie and I have made a commitment that we're not going to go to sleep at night mad at each other. So we stay awake all night many times. But no, we talk about it beforehand. And it says don't take it to bed with you. Make sure you resolve things, talk things through. You ever met people who just seem to wear their anger? I saw this shirt one time. Some people should wear it. It says this, warning contains bitterness and resentment. Ever met people like that? You just meet them and you can sense this person is a bitter person. They're wearing it even on their face. Anger. I found this, that the place it most shows up most often is behind the doors of our home. The people we're closest to. We get angry. Some of our team members were, some of you have been kind enough to host our team members, and we were at church some time ago, and a lady gave a testimony. She said, I'm housing 2 teen girls in my home. I have 2 grade school kids, and she said, normally in the morning we get up and we function pretty well and have breakfast and get dressed, and they're off to school. She said, the first 3 mornings that these girls were with us, it was just chaos. I mean, we were just, it was just, the kids were disobedient, they weren't ready, they were late. It was just, and finally, after 3 mornings, I realized why. Normally, for the first half hour, I yell at them. But I had these 2 guests in my home, I couldn't yell. My kids didn't know what to do. Mom wasn't yelling. And so they just kind of wandered around not knowing what to do. And she said, I realized the way I get my kids to do anything is as I yell at them. I was in another meeting where a man, one of the church staff members came and he said, He said, my grade school daughter came to me today, and she says, Daddy, I like you better at church. She said, I knew what she was saying. She said, at church, he was the associate pastor. He said, I am helping people. I'm directing people. I'm smiling. I'm shaking hands. I'm kind. I'm not that way at home. My daughter wants to live at church because I'm a different person in this building than I'm outside of this building. And when we have resentment and bitterness, the place it shows up most commonly is right behind the doors of our home. The reality is probably most people here need to go home tonight, have a family meeting, and say to their family, the way I've communicated, the things I've said, the way I've said them, the volume I've said them in, not like Jesus. I've not shown Christ to you. The anger I've shown here, the things I've done, will you please forgive me? Probably very few people won't have to go home and ask forgiveness of their closest family members because that's where our bitterness spews out. It shows up in anger. Maybe you need to choose to forgive someone who's been angry to you. Maybe their bitterness has spewed out on you, and because of their anger, you've been wounded. And you say, well, they need to come ask my forgiveness. Well, they do, but you don't worry about them. That's between them and God. You choose to forgive those that have wronged you. You ever been angry or bitter because you've been lied to? Write those people's names on your card. Here's the third one. It says in verse number 27, don't give the devil an opportunity. Don't give the devil an opportunity. I'm just going to say that's just making wrong choices. Opening the door to the enemy, making wrong choices. I was at my favorite bookstore recently. There's not many bookstores anymore. My new favorite bookstore is Hobby Lobby because they have a rack of books there. Now, one of the least favorite things for me to hear is my wife saying, will you take me to Hobby Lobby? I don't really like to go to Hobby Lobby. I said, why do you want me to go? She said, I want your opinion. I don't care. That's my opinion. I don't really care. I said, where are we going? She said, I want to buy a knick-knack. I looked up the dictionary. You know what a knick-knack is? A small, worthless object. That's what it says in the dictionary. Hobby Lobby is a store full of small, worthless objects. That's in my opinion. But anyway, we were there one time, and she brought me these two balls. She said, which one do you like better? I said, what are they? I played basketball in college. I coached basketball. I thought, how do you play with these? Is there a bat or is there a basket or is there what's the rules? And I said, what do you do with these balls? She said, you look at them. Non-functional balls. It's like that soap you have in the bathroom, that non-functional soap that comes in shape. You don't use it. Don't touch that soap. It's just non-functional. And I said, what are you going to do with those balls? She said, well, you know that shelf by the TV? I said, no. Why would I look at a shelf? The TV's right there. Well, I'm gonna get a basket. Now I gotta buy a basket. And I'm gonna put these balls in this basket so we can look at them. Makes no sense to me. But anyway, at Hobby Lobby, now she goes and looks at these non-functional items, and they have one rack of books. And it has like 25 on the side. So when we go to Hobby Lobby, I go to the bookstore and I sit there and read the book while she goes and looks for small worthless objects. But anyway, I was there some time ago, and I picked one up by Louis Giglio. It's a yellow book, and the title of the book was "Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table." And I read through most of the book. We were there a long time, and I don't have to buy books that way. It's great. So anyway, I'm reading this book, and the point of the book was that something had happened between Louis Giglio and another guy, and something came to light to make it look, to show that Louis was right and this guy was wrong. So he wrote a kind of a scathing email he was going to send to this guy, kind of rubbing it in that he was right. And he sent it to a friend of his and said, I'm thinking about sending this to so-and-so. What do you think? And his friend wrote back a line in an email, and it just said, don't give the enemy a seat at your table. And it was taken from the book, from the proverb, the 23rd Psalm. He prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies. And so Louis Giglio explained, here we are, we're in the presence of our enemy, and God says, now, I want to have a conversation with you. And so we're sitting here, me and God, having this conversation. The enemy's here, and here's what we do. We say, let me just check him in. Satan, what do you think? Satan, have a seat right here, and let me get your opinion. How foolish would that be? But so many times in our life, we are pulling up a chair for the enemy and saying, let me think this through. What would be your opinion about this? And we wouldn't have that conversation. But when we do things that we know are contrary to God's word, we're giving the enemy a seat at our table. Wrong choices. And so what wrong choices have you made that you need to go back and ask forgiveness for? Where have you opened it? Places you shouldn't have gone, things you shouldn't have looked at. Then confess it. You need to, first of all, confess it to God. Maybe someone else's bad choice affected you. We talked about this a little bit this morning. We have 6 children. One of our sons has made some really bad choices. And his choices are affecting our lives. And I have to deal with bitterness constantly about his choices and how they've affected our family dynamic, how they've affected us personally, how they've affected ministry. And I have to constantly go back and thank God for that situation because I don't feel like it, because it's not an enjoyable situation. And as a result of that, I can become bitter about the wrong choices of someone else and how that affects my life. And so you may need to write somebody's name down and say, I've got to choose to forgive this person, not because they've changed, but because I have let their wrong choice affect the way I respond to people in my life. It's so easy to get bitter at our children for their wrong choices. And this is just a sidelight. If when we're here for a longer event, we do a thing on Saturday on the family, but this is just kind of a rabbit trail here. It's worth writing down, though. There are 4 things that make up a child. 4 things that determine how a child's going to turn out. Number 1 is nature. They're born with a sin nature. Now, if they're a follower of Christ, God comes in, there's a new life, but they still have propensities. They're still born with certain desires and drives, and every child is different. Secondly is nurture. That's your job. Bring them up in the nurture admonition of the Lord. Thirdly is their choices. Every one of us is a result of our choices. You can choose your choices, but you can't choose the consequences of your choices. And you're not responsible for the choices of your adult children. I'm an adult. I make wrong choices. Why would it surprise me if my kids make some wrong choices? And so I think Satan has blackmailed a lot of people, a lot of adults, because their adult children made some wrong choices, and they're sitting there living on a guilt trip saying, what did I do wrong? And the fact is, they're a result of their choices. And fourthly is the grace of God that covers all of it. I can't be taking credit for the right choices of my adult children, but I'm not going to take the blame for the wrong choices of my adult children. So all that to say, nature, nurture, choices, and grace, you're 25% responsible. Take responsibility. Where you've wronged them, go back and ask forgiveness. Where you didn't bring them up, the nurture admonition of the Lord, ask forgiveness. Where you yelled at them, where you were angry, ask forgiveness. But realize you're 25% responsible. And don't live under the guilt that so many parents are living under because their kids have made wrong choices. That was a sidelight. Okay, here's the next one. He goes on and says, verse 28, let him who steals steal no longer. Let him labor with his hands, performing what is good. They'll have something to share with those in need. So fourth is stealing. I could give you 1,000 illustrations of people who stole things and went back in days just like this and made it right. I was in California some time ago. Pastor came before his church. He said, I had to go to Taco Bell this week and ask forgiveness. He said, I go to Taco Bell. My family goes to Taco Bell once a week. We love Taco Bell, and we eat there once a week. And when we leave, I take a stack of napkins, enough to last us for a week. There's no sign that says how many you can take. And so I take a week's worth. We come back the next week. We eat there. I take another week's worth. We've gone there for a year. I've not bought napkins in a year. Taco Bell supplies my napkins. He said, God convicted me. I've been stealing from Taco Bell. So he went back to the store manager and said, I've been coming in for the last year, you know me, but I've stole a year's worth of napkins. I want to pay for the napkins I've stolen for the past year. That's so silly. That's such a little thing. It's not a big deal. No one cares about napkins. You know what I would do if I was the devil? And that's not an announcement. But if I was the devil, I would get you to commit a sin that was so small you wouldn't deal with it, but so big I'd eat you alive with it. And what is in there? What is in your life that you say, yeah, I've thought about that, but it's not a big deal? Why wouldn't you want to take care of that? You think Satan's going to convince you need to go back and ask forgiveness, make something right? I don't think so. And the problem is there are so many issues of things that we have done and stolen. You need to go back and make it right. We were in a meeting in Florida some years ago, and I had some shoes. I'd gotten them in Michigan. They weren't very old. They were coming apart on a seam. and they were a national brand. I knew they had a guarantee. So I went to this mall in West Hollywood, Florida. I went to this shoe store of this company, and there was two guys in there, and I said, I have these shoes. I don't have a receipt, but you can see they're your shoes. It says right here. And you can tell by the sole, I've not worn them hardly at all, but they're coming apart right here, and I know you have a guarantee. I'd like to get some of your shoes. Well, they were not very kind. They were unkind, in fact. They didn't want to help me. They weren't going to make any money off this, and they didn't hardly give me the time of day, and they said they couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, and I knew they should have, and so I sucked up all the righteous indignation, that's anger, and I looked back in as I was leaving the store. I said, you guys have not heard the last of me. You've not honored your company's guarantee. I've gotten your names, so I hadn't. I'm going to write the president of your company, and you haven't heard the last of this. And I feel like I've done the world a favor. I came back. I got in the service that night, and the Spirit of God tapped me on the shoulder. I said, yes. I didn't hear any voices, but he lives inside of me. And it's like he said to me, I saw you at the shoe store. I said, yeah, I told them, didn't I, Lord? He said, that's not the way I'd have handled that. I said, yeah, but they should have asked my forgiveness. But he said, that's not the way I would have handled that. I said, yeah, but they were wrong. He said, yeah, but that's not the way. I said, what do you want me to do? And it's like God said to me, you need to go back and ask their forgiveness. I said, I'm not going back there. I didn't do anything wrong. They didn't know I was a Christian. I didn't act like one. I didn't hurt anything. So I'm not going back. Case closed. We left West Hollywood, went across the state to Sarasota, and I thought I'm never going back to West Hollywood again. We got to Sarasota. I'd been in that church about 3 days, and I was miserable. Because God followed me. He lives inside of me. And I was walking through the church, and I went in some room. I got out of my face, and I said, okay, God, you're right. I was wrong. My attitude was wrong. What I said to them was wrong. I was not like Christ. Thank you for your forgiveness. And God, if you'd ever make it possible for me to go back and ask for forgiveness, I would do that. I walked out of that room. I thought, I will never see those guys again. But you know, Lord, I would sure do it if I ever could. 2 days later, I got a phone call. This church had a large Christian school, and the administrator called and said our graduation speaker had to cancel, and some of the students wondered if you might be available to speak at graduation. I thought, well, when is it? It was like, weeks down the road, and I said, well, I'm going to be in this part of the country. They said, we'll fly you in. I had that day free, and without thinking, I said yes. Hung up the phone, realized what a dumb thing I just done, put myself back in West Hollywood. So weeks passed. I caught the plane, flew West Hollywood. He picked me up at the airport. I didn't even know the name of the mall. I said, there's probably all kinds of malls around here. He said, nope, only one. You want to stop? No. I said, it's probably not. He said, we drive right past. You want to stop? I said, we don't have time, do we? We have 2 hours. You want to stop? Would you quit being so helpful? I didn't say that, but I felt like it. I said, well, I need to stop. And so we pulled in. I got out of the car, and I said, just be a minute. I thought, God, you're not going to make me do this. I mean, those guys, this was a Saturday. That was a weekday. They probably don't work there. They're such bad employees. They probably got fired. They're not even going to be there. But I walked in that shoe store. There's nobody there except those same 2 guys. And I said, I was in here weeks ago trying to turn some shoes, and I'm a follower of Christ. And my attitude, the things I said to you was not Christ-like, and God's forgiven me. I've just come today to ask you, would you please forgive me for not representing Christ? You know what I learned from that? I learned that God is committed to my life. And if you'll say, God, I don't know how to get a hold of that person, but if you'll work it out, God, I will take care of it. You'll be amazed at what God will do. Are there people that need to go on your list that you need to go back to and ask because you stole something? Or maybe something was stolen from you and you're bitter about that. Maybe you need to forgive someone. I choose to forgive someone. Maybe someone stole your purity. They haven't come back and asked for forgiveness, and they may not. But have you chosen to forgive them? I was in a meeting one time where a lady came forward and she said 45 years ago, I was in a country. She was from a European culture, and she said, I was in a country that was overtaken by a foreign army, and I was raped by an officer of that army. She said, for 45 years, I have hated that man and that day. Today, for the first time, I thanked God for that man. I've never felt so free in my entire life. That didn't change the event, but her perspective changed. And she chose to thank God because God is sovereign and God is in charge. Here's the next one. It goes on and says in verse 29, let no unwholesome words proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good use edifying, that it may give grace to those who hear. So the next one is words. Have you ever said words that you wish you could take back? Man, I have. Have you gone back and asked forgiveness for those words? When I first heard this truth, the first people I went to was my 2 sisters and my parents, because I knew I had said things to them that were not kind. I couldn't hit rewind. I was in a meeting some time ago in Illinois, where a man came to me after a service similar to this, and he said, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking of the people that I need to put on my list, and 13 years ago, he said, I got divorced. It was horrible. My wife and I yelled, swore. It was horrible. We're horrible to each other. A year later, I got married to the woman that I'm currently married to. And we've been married now for about 12 years. He said, I'm sitting there in the service, and the Spirit of God is saying to me, you need to go back to your first wife and ask forgiveness for the way you treated her and things you said. And I'm wrestling with that, I wasn't saved, she wasn't saved. I'm just, wrestling with that. And my current wife elbows me. I said, what? She said, you need to go to, don't you? I said, who? Your first wife. Now you're telling me, my wife's telling me, the Spirit of God's telling me. And finally, at the end of the service, I said, God, I've not seen her in 12 years. But Lord, I know I need to go back and ask forgiveness. If you'll make it possible, I'll go back and ask for forgiveness. He said, Steve, you said amen. I stood up, I turned around, and there she stood in the aisle. She had sat through the same service I just sat through. I said, did you ask her forgiveness? He said, no, I didn't know what to do. I was just shocked to see her. Now, the next day, he went back and to take care of it. I'm just saying, God is committed to your life. And if you'll say yes to him, you'll be amazed at what will happen. What are the words that people said to you? Or maybe it's words that they didn't say to you. Here's another little rabbit trail worth writing down. There are 3 things every child wants to hear their parents say. And if you've not said these things recently to your child, whether they're grown or not, you need to say them. Number 1 is, I love you. Every child wants to hear that. I was in my 40s before I ever heard my dad tell me he loved me. I know he did, but he just didn't say that. It wasn't his culture. It wasn't his generation or whatever. I love you. If you did nothing else but go home and just tell all your kids, I love you, write a letter, send a text, send an email to your kids and grandkids, tell them you love them. It'd be worth your time here. Number 2, I'm proud of you. That they want to hear that. We don't say it because we think, well, if I tell them that, they might not do their best. And so we're always saying, you can do better, you can get better grades and work harder. You need to tell them, I'm proud of you. Here's why. And number 3, they want to hear, I love you, I'm proud of you. And thirdly, they want to hear you say, I was wrong. They know you are. You know you are. But if they've not heard you say that, if you do nothing else tonight but go home and say to your kids, I love you, I'm proud of you, I was wrong. I love you, here's why. I'm proud of you, here's why. I'm wrong, and here's where. It'd be well worth your time here tonight. But maybe you didn't hear those words. Maybe you didn't have a parent who said those words to you. You can't force them that you choose to forgive them because they didn't give you the encouragement you needed. They didn't tell you what you needed to hear. Then put them down your list. I'm going to forgive them because they maybe weren't the parents they need to be. That's between them and God. You take care of what you can do. And then here's the next one. He goes on and says, verse 30, don't grieve the Holy Spirit of God by whom you are sealed to the day of redemption. I'm going to put this in back up with the wrong choices because it's always a bad decision to open the door on the enemy or close the door on the Spirit. And so it again goes back to your choices. Are you giving the enemy a seat at your table? Are you closing the door on the Spirit? Are you grieving the Spirit of God by not doing what he has asked? Okay, so let's talk about the solution. I already gave you the solution, so let's review it. Stop hurting people. Here's what he says, verse 31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you with all malice. Stop hurting people. If you want to have right relationships, stop doing that. And then, verse 32, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving. Ask forgiveness where you've hurt others. Be kind, tenderhearted. That is not my norm. I'm not a kind, tenderhearted person by nature, but that's what the Spirit of God wants to grow in me. That's what he wants me to be to my kids, my grandkids, to my wife, to the people around me. It's what he wants of you. And then choose to forgive those that have hurt you, even as God, in Christ's sake, has forgiven you. Be forgiving. If you want to restore right relationships, if you want to refuel the right relationships, then stop hurting people, ask forgiveness, and choose to forgive those that have hurt you. Listen, bitterness is assuming a right you do not have. Giving forgiveness is obeying a command you have no right to disregard. So where does God find you? I told you I want to share with you 2 stories from this church I was at this year. The first one was about that man who found out that his dad wasn't his dad. This is a post that a girl in this church where we're at posted on Facebook, and The background is that she had, early when she was a young girl, a man had murdered her father. He had been arrested. He'd been put in jail. It had been 20 years, and he was getting paroled. And she was having to deal with the fact that this man was now going to be released, and her father was dead. Here's what she said. Life Action came in strong again, leaving my heart a lot lighter than it was 4 days ago. This 4-night conference couldn't have happened at a better time. The beginning of 2023 brought with a few growing pains for this girl, some pretty big choices: financial security, listening to others, forgiveness over bitterness and resentment. 2 nights ago in this conference, Steve Canfield did a talk on bitterness. As soon as I saw where the service was headed, I started to feel enclosed. I quickly texted one of my besties and said, give me a good reason to get out of here. In which her response was, I really think you should stay and just listen. So I did. As I listened, I heard how bitterness is like an atomic bomb waiting to explode. How it's assuming a right that we don't have. How we can spend our lives camped out at hurt corner or choose to turn on the freedom of forgiveness highway. Then came the statement that shook my heart. Bitterness is bitterness at God, not people. When I got home that night, I sat in my car for what seemed like forever. Just sat there in complete silence as that statement rattled inside the cold parts of my heart. You see, just last week I received a letter that I knew was coming, but I was relieved every day it wasn't in the mailbox. The man who took my daddy's life, his parole date was officially scheduled for early March. This time it seemed as if the bitterness set in double. And this time, as more evident than ever, it was spilling over into my daily life. From sleepless nights, shortness with the ones I love most, and the complete inability to handle the smallest inconveniences without outrageous irritation. As I thought back over the last 20 years, I remembered how I'd been graciously blessed with, even in the midst of the absence of my daddy, starting with a papa who put his own life on hold to raise a little girl that certainly gave him a run for his money. Nonetheless, he didn't allow that to keep him from loving me. An aunt and an uncle who saw to it that I've never gotten to miss the big memory maker moments in life. A 4th grade teacher who chose to stick with me through the weeds and flowery fields of life. I've seen God's love and provision to people at our church as they stood in the gap throughout my life. So taking all this in consideration, how could I ever actively choose to be bitter at God when he took the situation that started out as ashes and turned them into beauty? It quickly became clear as day what the next step was to be. And this could be the next step for you. 2 days ago, I started praying for the man whose actions changed the course of my family. And I will continue to do so for however long it takes. I have a long way to go on this mighty journey. However, I know that I can now be at peace with the decision of the parole board, as long as I'm willing to take a step back and let God be God. So immeasurably thankful for these few days and for the Word of God and where I'm headed and where I've been, where those who have been along the way to speak truth even when I've resisted. So thanks to Life Action Ministries, you've certainly left a mark on this girl's heart. It is well. It is well with my soul. The moon is always round. God is always good. What about you? Are you able to pray for the person that's hurt you? It's hard to be bitter at someone you're praying for. And the people that have wronged you, the people that have hurt you, I have an alarm on my clock, 10 o'clock every night it goes off, and we stop and pray for our son. We've done that for 11 years, every day at 10 o'clock. And we're not going to stop doing that. He's the one that steps on our heart. And so we've made a commitment to multiple times a day. We lift him up and pray that God would do what only he can do. What are you doing? Now pull out that little card for a minute. I hope you've taken some time to make a list. And if you've not, take some time before you go to bed tonight. I choose to forgive. Make a list. And then, who are the people you need to ask to forgive? I hope you've taken some time to do this. And if not, when you get home, take some time to do that. Then I want to suggest this. I want to suggest that you write down someone's name that you need to go to, that you can ask and say to them, will you hold me accountable? It's probably better to someone outside of your home, but ask somebody to hold you accountable. Say, I need to go to this person. Would you ask me in a week or a month if I've done that? And there's one more thing. Take out that paper cup that you have. Debbie, hand me that cup, will you? You got a styrofoam cup when you came in tonight. I'd like you to write your name on that cup. This was a big investment of us to give this to you. I know. I was reading about a person who was the Undersecretary of Defense. The defense budget for the United States is like $8 trillion or something, and if you've ever seen the cabinet, there's 26 cabinet members, and they meet with the president and so forth, and if you've ever seen a picture of the cabinet room, there's these 26 things around the table, and around the walls are the undersecretaries who really do probably most of the work. Then the Secretary of Defense was giving a speech at a place. He was actually the former Undersecretary of Defense. He had been the Undersecretary of Defense the year before. Now a new president come in, and so he had been, the secretary had been replaced, so he had been replaced, but he was speaking at this large conference. And he was giving his talk, and he had this styrofoam cup, and he stopped to take a drink of the coffee that was in it and kind of interrupted his own speech. He said, last year I came to this conference, I was the Undersecretary of Defense. I flew in first class. When I got to the airport, there was someone greeting me there, had a sign with my name on it. They got my bags and carried them to a limousine and drove me to the hotel. They'd already checked me in. They carried my bags up to the room, put them in my room, and handed me my keys. The next morning, I came down the lobby, and they were there to greet me. They put me in a limousine, drove me to the back of this conference center, put me into this green room, and gave me a ceramic mug with some steaming hot coffee. And I gave my presentation last year. Here I am, same conference. This year, I'm not the Undersecretary of Defense. I flew coach. When I got to the airport, no one was there to meet me. I had to catch a taxi to get to the hotel. I stood in a long line waiting to get my room and carried my bags up to my room. This morning I came down the lobby and there was no one there to greet me. I had to catch a cab, and I came to this function, and I'm in the front with thousands of people trying to get in and weave my way through. I got my way to the backstage. I said to one of the technicians, is there any coffee? He said, yeah, there's a machine over there. I went over there, I got a cup of coffee in this styrofoam cup. He said, this may be the most important thing I say to you in this whole conference. He said, it occurs to me that all the perks that I got last year were not meant for me. They were meant for the position that I held. And one day, you're going to move on in your life, and all the perks that you enjoy now are going to be for somebody else. Because they were never intended for you anyway. It wasn't about you. All you ever deserved was a styrofoam cup. And I want to suggest you can prepare yourself for future hurt by remembering that all you deserve is a styrofoam cup. All the things that you want to be treated with respect for, all the things you think you deserve, all you deserve is a styrofoam cup. And if you can keep that as your perspective, then it's a lot not as hurtful. But if you think you deserve the first class and the ceramic mug and this, and then it doesn't go your way, then we get bitter. But all you deserve is a styrofoam cup. So take that cup with your name on it, set it someplace on your desk or someplace in your dressers, and every time you start getting like demanding or I should, just remember, all you deserve is a styrofoam cup. And if you can keep that perspective, it'll keep you from getting hurt. Jesus Christ came to this earth in the form of a man. How did they treat him? That's how they treated him. Why would I expect anything different? If I can keep that perspective of what Christ went through, it'll change the way I view the hurts in life. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. I don't know what God has said to you tonight. Some of you are the people hurting others that hurt corner. You need to go back to them and ask forgiveness. You need to tell them you love them and that you've been wrong, and here's how, and that you're proud of them. You need to ask forgiveness. Some of you just need to choose people that have wronged you that are never going to come to you. And you're sitting there saying, well, when they ask my forgiveness, I'll forgive them. Aren't you glad God didn't do that to you? Choose to forgive those who have hurt you. Start praying for them. If you're having a hard time with forgiveness, start praying for the person that's hurt you. and then prepare for future hurt. We're going to live. We live in a crummy world with broken people. And until heaven, until God comes and redeems this creation, it's not going to get better. So get ready for that. Don't expect that. All you deserve is a styrofoam cup. Take a few moments. Talk to the Lord about those 4 things. Tell him what you're going to do with it. And then I'll pray. Father, thank you for these reminders. And again, for most of us, it's nothing we don't already know. But the fact is, we're not doing it. We're not asking forgiveness daily if we need to, weekly, monthly. We're not forgiving others. We're not praying for those that have wronged us. It's not that we don't know these things, God. Thank you for the reminders of tonight, and I pray that you'd help us to take some steps in obedience. I pray you'd help us to find someone that we can go to and ask for prayer and just make ourselves accountable. And I pray that the spirit of this church, as we interact with one another, would be a place where people understand that there is forgiveness granted and not demanded. And you'd find a group of believers starting right behind the doors of our home as they go home tonight to encourage and ask forgiveness and do what is necessary, and not to run from this truth. I pray in the name of Jesus, amen. Now before you leave, here's how I want to close. That there are people in this room that you need to go to perhaps and ask forgiveness. There's also people in this room that have impacted your life. Before you leave tonight, I want you to find 3 people that have impacted your life, that you have seen Jesus in them, and just go to them and say, I want you to know I appreciate you. I see Jesus, and here's why, and here's how. And let's be an encouragement to one another. So find the people you need to go to and encourage. Go to people you need to ask forgiveness from. Do it when you get home. We'll see you tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. You're dismissed. Have a good evening. Go find 3 people. 6:30, thank you so much. 6:30, we'll see you tomorrow night. Find 3 people, tell them you love them.